There is a specific kind of silence that only arrives after midnight, not the empty kind, not the peaceful kind, the kind that has weight to it, the kind that presses gently against your chest and makes you put your phone down and stare at the ceiling and wonder why, after everything, after all the distance and all the time and all the very reasonable arguments you have made to yourself about moving forward, why does this still feel unfinished? You have been so disciplined about it during the day. You've filled the hours. You have responded to messages, laughed at the right moments, stayed busy, stayed present, stayed fine. And you are fine. That part is true. But there is a difference between being fine and being free. And tonight, in this silence, you can feel that difference in your body. Because somewhere, right now, someone younger than you is lying awake thinking about you. Not wondering about you the way you wonder about a song you half remember. Not the passive kind of thinking, the kind where you close your eyes and the person just appears. The kind where you reach for your phone 3 times and put it back down. The kind that lives below the level of decision, below the level of logic. In the part of the mind that Carl Jung spent his entire life trying to understand. The unconscious, where the truest attachments take root so quietly that we don't even notice them growing until the night comes and there is nowhere left to hide. And here is what I want you to really sit with tonight. Not as a comfort, not as something soft to soothe you, but as a genuine psychological truth that most people are never taught. The connections that haunt us are not accidents. They are not weakness. They are not signs that something is wrong with you. They are the signature of depth, and depth in this world is extraordinarily rare. Let me tell you something about who you are in this dynamic. Because I think you have misread yourself. You have probably spent some time wondering if you imagined it, if you projected something that was never really there, if you were simply older and therefore more emotionally available, and they were simply younger and therefore temporarily entertained. You have probably tried on that story because it felt safer than the alternative. The alternative being that what existed between you was real. Quietly, disruptively, permanently real. And that they felt it too, maybe more than they ever showed you. Here is what I know about the psychology of emotional connection across an age gap. It does not behave the way people expect. Popular culture teaches us to expect infatuation, heat, something bright and brief and easy to explain. What nobody talks about is the other kind. The slower kind. The kind that doesn't announce itself. The kind where someone 10 or 15 years younger than you starts noticing things about you that most people their own age, people who should understand them better, simply cannot see. They notice the way you hold your composure when everything around you is tilting. They notice that you never perform emotion. You either feel it or you don't. And when you do, it moves through you in a way that feels ancient, considered, real. They notice that your silence is never empty, that there is something behind your eyes that most people in their life do not have. And without fully understanding why, they begin to feel safer near you than they feel anywhere else. That kind of safety is not romantic at first. It is almost disorienting, because they have spent their entire young life in a world of emotional noise, people who overshare and underfeel, people who say everything and mean very little, people who perform intimacy without offering any real vulnerability. And then there is you, saying less, meaning more, not chasing, not performing, just being. And something in them goes quiet in a way it has not gone quiet in years, maybe ever. Jung called this the activation of the unconscious. When we meet someone who embodies qualities that exist in our deeper self, qualities we have buried, qualities we are still becoming, qualities we have been quietly longing to encounter in another person, something below the level of conscious thought begins to stir. It is not simply attraction. It is recognition. The soul recognizing something it needed before the mind had the language to say so. And that recognition is exactly what lives in the younger person who's thinking about you tonight. But here is where it gets complicated. because recognition does not automatically lead to courage. You need to understand something that is not often said plainly. Younger people, not all of them, but many of them, are terrified of the very thing they are drawn to. They are drawn to emotional depth, but depth requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires them to put down the armor they spent years constructing. The irony of someone who craves genuine connection is that they often spend enormous energy running from it, not because they do not want it, because they want it so badly that the idea of reaching for it and having it slip away is genuinely unbearable. So, what do they do instead? They pull back. They go quiet at the moments when they feel most connected. They become suddenly unavailable right after a conversation that went somewhere real. They act cooler than they feel. They tell themselves stories about why this is impractical, why the timing is wrong, why this cannot work. They create distance as a form of protection, and from the outside, that distance looks like indifference. But it is not indifference. It is the opposite of indifference, so covered in fear that it became unrecognizable. Have you ever noticed how the people who feel the most never seem to show it? How the ones who are most deeply affected are often the quietest about it? There is a reason for that. Emotional depth and emotional expression do not always travel together. In fact, sometimes the deeper the feeling, the harder it is to find words that feel equal to it. And rather than say something that falls short of what they actually feel, some people say nothing at all. They go silent. They disappear into themselves. And the person on the receiving end, you, is left to interpret that silence with nothing to guide them except their own intuition. And your intuition has been telling you something, hasn't it? That is why you are here tonight. That is why this particular kind of silence feels heavy instead of peaceful. Your nervous system knows something your rational mind keeps trying to negotiate around. The body always knows. Long before the mind admits anything, the body is already responding to truth. So let me offer you something your mind has been resisting. What you felt with this person was not a fantasy. What you experienced was not you reading too deeply into something ordinary. Ordinary connections do not linger like this. Ordinary connections do not surface at midnight when everything else goes quiet. Ordinary connections do not rearrange the way you see yourself. If this were nothing, it would have felt like nothing by now. The fact that it still has weight, that weight means something, and you already know that. That is why part of you keeps returning to it, even when you're certain you've let it go. Now I want to talk about the specific experience of being the older one in this dynamic, because I think it is one of the most psychologically underexplored experiences in relationships. There is a particular loneliness that comes with being emotionally mature in a world that is still catching up. When you are the person who has already done a great deal of inner work, who has sat with your own pain, made sense of your own patterns, developed a relationship with your own emotional world, you can find yourself in a strange position. You can see other people with unusual clarity. You can sense what they are feeling before they can name it themselves. You can hold space for someone without needing them to perform in order to deserve your presence. But that same clarity can make connection feel scarce, because not everyone you meet can meet you there. And so when someone, even someone younger, even someone still in the middle of becoming, actually does begin to see you, not the version of you that you present, but the actual you, the one that most people walk right past. Something in you opens in spite of yourself, something you had maybe convinced yourself you no longer needed. And then comes the confusion, because this person does not behave the way their feelings suggest they should. They disappear. They become complicated. They give you just enough to keep you present and then withdraw, just enough to keep you uncertain. And you, who are old enough to know better, who have navigated enough relationships to recognize manipulation when it appears, find yourself confused. Not because you are naive, because what they are doing is not manipulation. It is ambivalence. And ambivalence is far more disorienting than cruelty, because cruelty at least gives you something to push against. Ambivalence leaves you in a hallway. Both doors are closed. You cannot go back because something real happened. You cannot move forward because nothing has been said. You stand in the middle with feelings that have nowhere to land. And that, psychologically, is one of the most destabilizing places a human being can inhabit. Jung wrote that until we make the unconscious conscious, it directs our lives, and we call it fate. What he meant is that most of the forces driving human behavior are invisible to the person experiencing them. The younger person in your life is not navigating their feelings about you consciously. They are being moved by things they have not yet examined: attachment wounds from childhood, fear of abandonment, fear of engulfment, the complicated psychology of reaching for something that feels both exactly right and completely terrifying. They are not doing this to you. They are living through something within themselves that happens to involve you. That distinction matters enormously, because when you understand that their behavior is driven by their own unresolved interior, their own shadow in Jungian terms, you stop taking it personally. And when you stop taking it personally, something shifts. Not because you stop caring, but because you stop making their emotional confusion the measure of your own worth. Here is the truth about shadow in relationships. Jung believed that we are drawn to people who carry, either in their personality or in our projection onto them, the qualities that exist in our own unconscious shadow. The parts of ourselves we have denied, repressed, or not yet integrated. And when we meet someone who activates that shadow material, the attraction feels electric and strange and almost fated, because it is not simply chemistry. It is the unconscious self reaching toward its own completion. For the younger person, you represent something their shadow carries. Perhaps you represent emotional security they never learned to find within themselves. Perhaps you represent the version of themselves they are becoming, wiser, more grounded, more at peace with complexity. Perhaps you represent the quality of attention and depth they have always craved, but never believed they deserved. And being near you activates all of that at once, which is exhilarating and overwhelming in equal measure. This is why they cannot simply decide to stop thinking about you. You are not a preference they can override with willpower. You are woven into the fabric of their own psychological becoming. The connection does not live on the surface of their life where decisions are made. It lives deeper than that, in the place where the self is still being formed. And tonight, in the quiet, that is exactly where they are. Down there, beneath the decisions and the daily movements and the performance of being fine. Down where the night makes honesty unavoidable. Down where your face appears without permission and they cannot pretend, even to themselves, that this has faded the way they told people it had. They remember things about you that surprise even them. Not the big moments, the small ones, the exact tone of your voice when you said something unguarded. The specific way you looked at them once. Not romantically, not strategically, just seeing them, and how that look made something in their chest do something unfamiliar. The conversation that went somewhere unexpected, and they drove home afterwards, feeling more known than they had felt in years, and then lay awake for hours, trying to understand why. Those small moments do not let go easily. They are not supposed to. They are not the residue of fantasy. They are the memory of genuine contact, two human beings actually reaching each other beneath the layers of protection, and the nervous system records that kind of contact differently than ordinary experience. It does not file it away. It returns to it again and again, as though still trying to metabolize something that was perhaps too real to be processed all at once. And maybe you felt that too, in a slightly different way, with a slightly different weight, but you felt it. You felt the precise quality of that connection, and you recognized it as rare. And that recognition has followed you too, even as you made all the reasonable choices, even as you stepped back and gave them space and told yourself very mature things about timing and compatibility and what you deserve. Even now, beneath all of that, the recognition remains intact. Here is what I want you to understand about where you are in your own journey. The emotional work you have done, the self-examination, the willingness to feel things clearly rather than numb them, the choice to remain open even when openness has sometimes cost you. That work is not wasted here. It is not naive. It is not what made you vulnerable to false hope. It is the very thing that made this connection possible in the first place. You cannot be genuinely seen by someone if you are not genuinely present. And you were present. That is not a weakness. That is what makes you someone worth thinking about at midnight. But the work you are doing now, the quieter, harder work of sitting with uncertainty without forcing resolution, that is perhaps the deepest work of all. Because the human mind hates open loops. We are wired to resolve, to conclude, to know. And a connection that lives in the space between spoken and unspoken, between present and absent, between real and uncertain. That connection is an open loop that the mind will keep circling until it finds a way through. The way through is not getting an answer. The way through is learning to be at peace with not having one yet. This is something most relationship advice will not tell you, because it is not satisfying and it does not feel empowering in the way we have been taught empowerment should feel. But the truth is, some of the most significant connections in a human life exist in their fullest form, precisely in the unresolved space. Not because they are meant to stay unresolved, but because the unresolved space is where growth happens, where self-knowledge happens, where the soul does some of its most important work. What the younger person is feeling tonight, that restlessness, that return, that inability to fully release the thought of you, is not simply longing. It is the soul in motion. It is the psyche working through something at the level where real transformation occurs, and your presence in their thoughts is not incidental to that work. You are part of what is moving them forward, even from a distance, even in silence, even without knowing it. That is a particular kind of power that has nothing to do with strategy. You did not engineer this. You did not calculate what to say or how to appear or when to pull back to create just the right level of mystery. You simply showed up as yourself, complex, genuine, emotionally real. That was enough. That was more than enough. That was for them, perhaps everything. And now I want to say something directly to the part of you that has been quietly wondering whether any of this was mutual. Whether what you felt was real in both directions or only in yours. Listen to what your body already knows. Not the fear, not the doubt, not the very reasonable voice that has been reminding you of all the ways this could be complicated. Listen to the quieter signal beneath all of that. The one that does not argue with you. The one that has simply been present since the moment this person appeared in your life. That signal is not hope, it is not delusion, it is intuition. And intuition is the unconscious mind having already processed what the conscious mind is still debating. Something real happened. Something real is still happening beneath the surface of what either of you has chosen to say or not say. And that reality does not require you to do anything dramatic with it right now. It does not require pursuit or declaration or perfect timing. It simply requires you to stop arguing with yourself about whether it exists. It exists. You know it exists. They know it exists. The night knows it. The silence that is pressing gently against your chest right now knows it. And here is perhaps the most important thing I can offer you before this ends tonight. The depth you carry, the emotional maturity, the hard-won clarity, the capacity to love in a way that is grounded and real and not dependent on performance. That depth is not a burden. I know it can feel like one sometimes. I know it can feel like being too much or too complicated or simply older than the moment. But that depth is what makes you unforgettable to someone who has finally tasted what genuine connection feels like. They cannot unfeel you. They cannot reason their way out of what knowing you did to their interior world. And so tonight, in the quiet, they come back, as they will likely come back tomorrow night and the night after that, until something finally shifts and the truth that has been living beneath the surface finds its way into the light. You do not need to wait for them to validate what you already know. You do not need their acknowledgement to trust your own experience. You were not wrong about what happened between you. You were not projecting. You were not foolish. You were present, open, and genuinely yourself. And that is the rarest thing a person can offer another human being. Whatever comes next, whether they find the courage to close the distance or whether this remains a connection that teaches you something you could not have learned any other way, what has already happened cannot be taken from you. The recognition was real. The depth was real. And you, exactly as you are tonight, lying awake with this quiet weight in your chest, wondering and feeling and being too honest with yourself to pretend otherwise, you are someone worth thinking about at midnight. Someone, right now, knows that better than you do.